A 13-year-old girl vanished overnight. Her front door was unlocked. The gas stove was still on. And her glasses, the ones she couldn't see without, were still by the door. But when she was found, it wasn't at school. It wasn't with friends. It was in an abandoned house. And there, in a dark back room, they found Kei'Mani Latigue, lying still, left alone. Her throat had been cut so deeply. It nearly separated her head from her body. And her hands. Her hands were missing from her wrists. But why? The violence wasn't just brutal, it was intentional. Not just meant to kill, meant to erase. Welcome back to Criminally Human, where behind every headline is a person, a choice, and a tragedy that didn't have to happen. Kei'Mani Latigue was just 13 years old, a bright girl caught in a complicated family story. She was born to Latigue, a young mother facing serious life challenges and instability. While Darnell Jones was long believed to be her biological father, this was never officially confirmed, and his role in her life was anything but steady. He had a long criminal history, including past charges related to violence, drugs, and weapons. Despite this, he was still allowed access to Kei'Mani, a decision that would have devastating consequences. He should have never been trusted with her. In her early childhood, Kei'Mani lived for a time with her godmother, Tina Johnson, who stepped in to provide a more stable, nurturing home during some of her most vulnerable years. Eventually, the responsibility of raising Kei'Mani fell to her grandmother, Shirley Latigue. Shirley worked overnight shifts and became Kei'Mani's primary caregiver and strongest supporter. Under Shirley's care, Kei'Mani began to thrive. She was an honor roll student, a Kindness Award nominee, well-loved by her teachers, classmates, and especially by Shirley. But even in what seemed like a safe home, danger found its way in. Trust was misplaced, warnings overlooked, and a life would be forever changed. On March 18, 2025, Shirley returned home after working an overnight shift. What she walked into didn't feel right. The front door was unlocked. The gas stove was still on. Kei'Mani's glasses, the ones she couldn't function without, were sitting by the door. But Kei'Mani was gone. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. The house was mostly undisturbed. But something was clearly terribly wrong. Shirley began calling friends and family. No one had seen Kei'Mani. In growing panic, she called 911. Law enforcement sprang into action. They canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, speaking with friends, neighbors, and anyone who might know where Kei'Mani had gone. Through interviews, phone records, and surveillance footage, investigators began piecing together a timeline, and one name rose to the surface: Darnell Jones. Jones was identified as the last known person to see Kei'Mani alive. He initially claimed that she had called him that night, scared because someone was trying to break in. He said he stayed with her for a while and then left around 12:30 a.m. But his story changed, and then changed again. Authorities brought Jones in for questioning. Meanwhile, days into the search, a tip came in that led officers to a decaying, abandoned house on Miami Street. On March 24, 2025, officers entered the property. The building was in disrepair. Broken windows, trash on the floor, used needles in every corner. In a dark back room they found Kei'Mani. Her body had been brutalized. Her throat had been cut so deeply that it nearly severed her head. Her hands had been removed. An autopsy later confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted, mutilated, and intentionally discarded. DNA evidence collected from her clothing and from inside the abandoned house linked Darnell Jones directly to the crime. More than 200 pieces of evidence were collected, including text messages, video footage, and digital tracking. All of it pointed to Jones. Darnell Jones was arrested in Columbus, Ohio, on March 25, after a standoff with police. During his arrest, he pulled a gun and was shot by officers. He survived and was taken into custody. While in custody, he confessed to dragging Kei'Mani to the abandoned house and killing her with a bladed weapon. He now faces a multi-count indictment, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, gross abuse of a corpse, endangering children, tampering with evidence. His bond was set at $4 million. A tentative trial date is scheduled for April 2026. Kei'Mani Latigue was intelligent, kind, and full of promise. She loved school. She loved her friends. She loved her family. And in the end, the very person who should have protected her the most turned out to be the one who took everything from her. Her death sent shockwaves across Ohio. From Cincinnati to Cleveland, candlelight vigils were held in her name. Schools honored her memory. Strangers wore purple, her favorite color, to show solidarity. Support poured in from every corner of the state. Teachers, activists, neighbors, even those who had never met her. They came together to mourn her loss, but also to demand justice, and to remind the world that Kei'Mani mattered. In a strange turn of events, the home was set on fire. But as the candles burned out and the headlines faded, deeper questions remained. How did this happen? Why was a man with such a violent history ever trusted with a child? And how many times do we have to say never again, only to face the same heartbreak once more? Kei'Mani Latigue didn't fall through the cracks, she was pushed. By a system that didn't act. By adults who ignored the red flags. By a world that too often turns away until it's too late. Her death is not just a tragedy, it's an indictment. She should have turned 14. She should have blown out candles and laughed with her friends. She should still be here. Instead, a little girl is gone. Who failed Kei'Mani Latigue? Her mother. Where was the stability you promised? Her grandmother. How did your trust become a fatal mistake? Godmother. Why couldn't your shelter last? The system. How many chances did you waste? And Darnell Jones, how could you destroy a life so young? You were the only father that she knew. So ask yourselves, who failed her?